Intelligence High School Debate.
Hello and welcome to Intelligence High School Debate. I'm your host, Seongnam. Have you heard about the 3 gates of speech? According to this old proverb, your words should pass through 3 gates before you speak them out. At the first gate, ask yourself, is it true? At the second gate, is it necessary? And at the third and final gate, is it kind? Now, I think this principle not only applies to everyday speech, but also to debating as well. So on that note, let's open the 3rd episode of Intelligence High School Debate.
This tournament adapts the British parliamentary style. The debate consists of 4 teams of 2 speakers with 2 teams on either side of the case. Each speaker should deliver a 5-minute speech, and teams gain points individually even if on the same side. The first and last minute of each speech is protected from the point of information.
So without further ado, let's go ahead and meet our students. Now students, your teams and sides will be chosen by drawing lots, so each school please step forward and randomly select a scroll. First up is Hana Academy Seoul. Let's see what they have chosen. And please show it to our camera. They have chosen closing opposition. And next up is Incheon International High School, Bae-sujin and Lee Min-chae. Please select a scroll. The opening government, they'll be speaking first. Thank you. Next up are the students from Jae High School, Lee Chae-hyun and Kang Hyun-woo. Let's see which scroll they choose. Closing government. Okay, and that means that by the process of elimination, Seongnam Foreign Language High School students, Kang Soo-min and Lee So-min, they are the opening opposition. That's right, opening opposition. Please come and take your seats. Our students have all assumed their positions, so let's go ahead and meet our teams. On opening government, we have students from Incheon International High School.
Thank you. We are the students from Incheon International High School, and we will do our best to make a fair and logical debate. Thank you.
And going in direct opposition to the opening government is the opening opposition, students from Seongnam Foreign Language High School.
It's a great honor for us to participate today, and we'll do our best.
All right. Now time for the closing teams. On closing government, we have students from 양재 High School.
Since we are the selected member from our school, we will try our best in order to qualify to the semifinals.
All right, and going in direct opposition to the closing government is, of course, the closing opposition. Students from Hana Academy Seoul.
It's an honor to represent our school, and we'll try our best to make a good debate.
Government is providing maximum minimum level of equality for citizens, and the government is wrong, but the fact is we live in a reality that has many obstacles that make us feel that therefore
All right, now let's go ahead and meet our 3 judges. First of all, we have Professor Kang Yong-seung from Yonsei University Law School. Thank you for joining us. And we're also joined by Professor Peter Kip, Professor of English Literature at Ewha Women's University. Last but not least, we're also joined by Akira Kato, the champion of the English Parliamentary Debate Tournament in Japan. And last but not least, we're also joined by 50 audience judges, high school students from Sangmun High School. Hello and welcome to our show. Now, our high school students, they will show their support for the speaker in the form of green lights. If they agree with the speaker, they will turn their lights on. If they don't, they will leave it off. Now, the number of green lights will be reflected in the final results, so please make your decision carefully. All right, without further ado, let's go out and check the motion for today's debate.
What would it be like if governments provided an unconditional sum of money to all citizens regardless of income or property owned? That way, we can spread the wealth in our society, thereby reducing the growing inequality across the world. However, some say that recipients might lose sight of the value of hard work, which is one of the most noble and treasured aspects of life. Will a universal basic income provide a more secure and substantial safety net for all people or impede national development? This house believes that governments should provide a universal basic income.
As you just saw in the video, the concept of universal basic income is about providing a fixed cash grant to every citizen, regardless of their employment status or wealth. Now, with a new government here in Korea, this issue has once again come to the surface, so let's see what our students have to say on the matter. First up is the Prime Minister. Please step forward to the podium. You may begin at the sound of the beep.
Honorable judges and audiences, this is the Prime Minister of the House, and this House believes that the government should provide a universal basic income. In 2017, Finland started an economic experiment which provides 2,000 people a minimum income for 2 years. This randomly selected participant will continue receiving money even if they get a job. This experiment is the largest experiment looking at what happens when you give every citizen a universal basic income. This policy is gaining support around the world from Silicon Valley to India. Since the global financial crisis in 2008, many experts view this universal basic income as the best way to solve economic inequality and promote overall wealth of the society. And this House also believes that the government should provide a universal basic income to every nation. Before start, this speaker will declare the definition of the universal basic income. Universal basic income, also referred as a guaranteed income, has a simple concept. In order to ensure that every citizen can offer to meet their basic needs, government provides every citizen with a set of amount of money on a regular basis, enough to lift them above the poverty line. And from now on, to argue the reliability and credibility of the House, the speaker would provide some evidences. First, UBI, the Universal Basic Income, provides a foundation to overcome economic inequality to citizens and, moreover, promote the overall economic level of the society. Influential 20th century economists Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek claimed that UBI is a best way to elevate poverty in a government level. The assurance of a certain minimum income for everyone is not only a legitimate protection against the risk common to all, but also an opportunity to reduce the governmental tax spending. To make it clear, what we are arguing is not about fully eliminating the gap between rich and poor. Our claim is that UBI will be an open door and an opportunity to the people who are trying to make a new start of their life. No, thank you. And the point is that we are starting to argue about the long-term benefit of this policy, and the logical fallacies like the mere estimate of the experiment and the hasty generalization cannot be accepted as a credible evidence. Also, the UBI can eliminate nearly all kinds of the government-provided net welfare policies like unemployment subsidies, Medicare, and so forth. These programs involve a tremendous amount of the government spending that is purely administrative in nature and economically extremely counterproductive. Currently, the U.S. is spending 1,100 billion of them fund in welfare, and UK is using 33% of the annual budget. So providing UBI can eventually save huge amount of the tax and give a chance to use those saved tax in more useful fields like national defense, international environmental crisis, and so on. Also, some critics argue that the UBI can lead people not to work. However, according to the UBI experiment in Canada, UBI system tends to stimulate additional economic activity like entrepreneur activity, since the penalty risk for failing is not as dire when the UBI system is supporting them. Providing UBI is a basic role of the government, which should be guaranteed to all citizens. The first duty of the government is to provide a maximum happiness and the minimum level of the hardship to the citizens. Government, which is a group of representatives, has a duty to provide this basic happiness to the citizens, and therefore, to satisfy the basic definition and the reason of this existence, government should guarantee the UBI system to the citizens. Also, UBI is directly related to the basic civil rights. What we're talking about is a basic income, which is fundamental to the basic standard of living to citizens. In other words, a basic income provides opportunity for citizens, such as a chance to start a new business or acquire a basic education and sustain a humanistic life standard. Therefore, the UBI system will become a root and a basic of the civil right, and moreover, highlight the basic standard of living of the society. To conclude, according to the economical, humanitarian, and sociological evidences, this House is strongly believing that the government should provide a universal basic income to citizens and promote the well-being of the whole society. Thank you.
Okay, that was the Prime Minister arguing for the motion, so arguing that the government should provide universal basic income. So how persuasive was the Prime Minister? Let's find out. Please switch your lights on if you agree with the speaker. We'll count how many lights have been switched on out of 50. Okay, I see 20 out of 50 lights have been switched on, so this means that just under half of our audience judges agree with the Prime Minister. Now let's see if the Leader of Opposition can persuade us in the opposite direction. Leader of Opposition, please step forward.
We are not living in a utopia, ladies and gentlemen. We live in reality that has many obstacles that block us. Therefore, making kind and ideal policies like the given motion is very hard to be realized. We, the opposition, is here to prove this. As a leader of the opposition, I will present specific reasons that will prove that the universal basic income will do more harm than good to our society and point out the flaws in the Prime Minister's arguments. First, I would like to point out what was wrong with their arguments. They said that this policy can overcome the economic gap between the poor and the rich. And they said that this is the best way that we can solve this problem. But we say that this is wrong because tackling and trying to solve the fundamental problems in our society that led to these kind of crisis of the gap between the poor and the rich, such as unemployment rates or the whole social structure and the society kind of forcing the rich to become more rich and making rich people become more rich and poor people become more poor is something that should be solved. And actually just saying that we should give out universal basic income to people can solve all of these complicated problems is actually just a elementary idea, and therefore is not realistic. Also, they said that there will be a long-term benefit if we agree to the motion. But we say that it actually is a temporary solution to the gap between the poor and the rich, because with this motion, if we agree to this motion and let this policy happen for years to come, that means that we have to deal with the increasing cost of food and housing. So that means we have to collect more tax from people to support these people throughout the years. And people will definitely disagree to increasing tax rates, and therefore their two arguments do not stand. Now I will go on and explain why we definitely should disagree to the given motion. First, it gives less incentive to work. The main reason communism failed is because we made a mistake of choosing equality over economic efficiency as the main value of the society, while we had to consider both values. Because people were rewarded equally, the hard workers were disappointed about their treatment, and the lazy ones decided to work less and less. We believe that the universal basic income will have a similar effect. Some people might think that communism is a more dramatic example, but what it has in common with the universal basic income is that with people that receive income without working harder than others, people will feel less and less responsible about their role and duty in their country, and will not feel the need to work hard because they feel stable. And also, with the financial problem we have to face, such as increasing unemployment rate, it is becoming harder for ordinary people to open their wallets to pay taxes. And this is why we believe that it is actually hard to get the money for this policy. This is our second reason. And because the financial resources we need to provide the universal basic income is a plan that only can happen in a utopia, doesn't fall from the sky. We need the tax from citizens. But in reality, no, thank you. But in reality, citizens, especially if we're talking about Korea, are suffering from the ongoing increase of tax. According to a study from the OECD, in 2015, Koreans have suffered from paying 25% more of money compared to 2010, which was 5 years ago. This financial problem makes people more harder to open their wallets, and especially because the universal benefit, basic income means that we need to provide every citizen. with enough money to live, meaning that at least 100,000 won for everyone, the tax that is imposed will inevitably be largely increased, and many people will definitely disagree on this motion. Therefore, the proposition's argument do not stand, and we should definitely disagree to the given motion.
Okay, that was the leader of opposition arguing against the motion, therefore arguing that the governments should not provide universal basic income. So let's see if the leader of opposition did a good job at persuading our audience. Let's see how many of our lights have been switched on. So the leader of opposition received 31 out of 50 lights. This means that the leader of opposition did a better job than the Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister received 20. All right, time now to hear from the Deputy Prime Minister. Please step forward to the podium.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Deputy Prime Minister of the upcoming government. I would like to mention the three aspects of three fallacies that the opposition side have mentioned, and I would like to rebut to these facts in mainly three arguments. First of all, the opposition side have mentioned that overcoming economic gap through the universal basic income is wholly unrealistic. But however, I would like to mention that you didn't provide a definitive or a descriptive evidence to this argument. And I would also like to mention that what our team is trying to say is we are not trying to say that this universal basic income can wholly overcome the economic gap. However, we would like to mention that this policy can provide foundation for people suffering from poverty to go into the society and go into and have economic life. Yes. And secondly, we would like to mention that.
POI, ma'am.
Yes.
If you really want those to solve the problems of those suffering from poverty, then why don't we concentrate the money only for the people suffering from poverty?
That is a matter of equality. If we only provide money to the ones who are suffering from poverty, who decides the standard of poverty? That is a question, that is a problem. And secondly, I would like to mention that the opposition side has mentioned this universal basic income will become a temporary solution to the gap of the rich and the poor, and increasing costs of social infrastructure will result in more tax. However, I would like to mention that basic income could have the advantage of eliminating or radically scaling back nearly all other kinds of government provided welfare payments for unemployment, food subsidies, housing, childcare, education, and so forth. And lastly, I would like to mention that the opposition side have mentioned the universal basic income will become hard for ordinary people and hard to get the money because they're suffering from increase of tax. And also you mentioned that people who get universal basic income will have less motivation to work hard. I have two experiments to support my agreement. First, Canada experiment held in 1970s. It was a famous basic income experiment, and data from this and other experiments do show that some people would tend to work less if they have the change. But the data also show that a basic income tends to stimulate additional economic activity, particularly entrepreneurial activity, because the penalty for falling with a new venture.
On that point?
No thanks. And that new venture is not as drastic when there is a basic income. And I have another experiment to support our agreement. Second, Indian policy. It was held recently in 2017, and the statistics have proved that small business radically and rapidly increased because of universal basic income.
On that point, ma'am?
No, thank you. So as a conclusion to wrap up, our team strongly believes that the government should provide a universal basic income based on humanitarian and sociological and economic ideas. And we would like to further mention that the over increasing tax is illogical because basic income can have the advantage of limiting or radically scaling basically nearly all the other kinds of government. As a result, this House strongly believes that governments should provide a universal basic income. Thank you.
Okay, that was the Deputy Prime Minister arguing for the motion, so arguing that the government or governments should provide universal basic income. So let's see how many of our audience members agree with the Deputy Prime Minister. 29, so more than her partner, the Prime Minister. That brings the total for the opening government 49 out of 100. Okay. Let's continue on with the last speaker of the opening teams, Deputy Leader of Opposition. Please step forward.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would first like to thank the government team for bringing up this kind of intention to make a better society, which will not happen. And now we will further on, we would like to elaborate. Well, first of all, they said that we need to make the standard of poor and rich, so therefore we need to give out this money as the whole society. However, there is no kind of direct successful examples in other foreign countries too. They talked about Finland too, but only a bit of developed countries are implementing this policy partially, and we cannot actually bring out the results of the whole society and the effect of it. Also, they said that this could actually have a long-term benefit, and it can actually save the huge amount of tax and use in other ways too. However, there's no direct evidence that tax will not increase. And also, money is a limited resource, and we should consider that point, of course. And they also talked about civil rights, but we're not really sure about this point because inflation would happen and additional side effects will definitely happen. And how can we actually save the civil rights of those suffering from poverty? And also, they talked about small businesses and stimulating additional activities, but that's just an assumption, and it's a part of a small example. If we look at other examples, there are actually side effects, and I'll elaborate that more on my arguments. So now we would like to move on to our third argument of our team, and we believe that this cannot solve the fundamental problem. The purpose of this policy is to narrow the gap between the poor and solve income inequality. However, we believe that this is a too absurd plan. The average money the citizens earn per year from this policies is only 1 million won. So divide that into 12 months. Per month, we only receive 100,000 won. And of course, they can have more delicious food, and a bit of time to feel their life and enjoy their life, but that's it. This policy will never solve the fundamental problem of income inequality itself. The opposition also argued that it has a long-term benefit, but will our country actually earn something from this as a long-term solution? According to a research panel, Brain in 2016, we found out that 73% of the people, they said that they would still do their jobs even after their policy. And also, 30% of the people said that they would actually quit their jobs. So this means that the jobless people actually increases 3 times more. And also, this is actually...
POI, ma'am?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Does the speaker believe that people will quit their job only for the 1 million won?
We're not saying only for that 1 million won, but that is actually a factor influencing their thoughts. They make them feel that maybe I should quit my job because I earn a sum of money. And we believe that will definitely influence them. And also, there is an actual evidence in Spain because after UBI, they actually increased jobless people in their country. Also, money is a limited resource, and as we explained before, once our government does not have enough money, what will happen to our society? What will the citizens do from then on? And also, we are curious, why all people? Why is this policy universal? Shouldn't we concentrate the money for only about the 40 and 50% of the people who are in actual poverty in our country? Aren't they the ones who are suffering from the actual income inequality in our society? We believe that the government has to answer to this question again too.
On that point?
No, thank you. And how is the government going to control and manage all these monies? How can we know these monies going to where? And also, this policy can never actually tackle the social structure itself. If we don't change the social structure, then even just giving money will give out no meaning to the people. It can never actually achieve its goals that this policy has. So therefore, there's a lot of contradictions in this point. And this is actually short term, just giving money. And we believe that this could actually go up and expand to the government's irresponsibility because it's just giving them money, not changing all the basic things for them. So therefore, this idea of universal basic income may sound very equal to everyone because it's universal, just as its name, universal basic income. However, we would like to question today, is it here to really make an equal society? We believe not. Can it actually make our society equal? We believe not. So we once again strongly argue that the government should not provide a universal basic income in this society. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a deputy leader of opposition arguing against the motion, so that governments should not provide universal basic income. So let's check out the audience response. Let's see how many lights have been turned on. And the count is 33. That means that the total count is 64 for the opening opposition, and they did a better job at persuading our audience judges than the opening government. Okay, so we've heard from both opening teams. Now let's hear from the judges and see how they have viewed the debate. First, Professor Kang Young-seung.
So let me first talk about the opening government team. The PM, the first speaker, I thought that you did a wonderful job of discussing a lot of different ideas and examples in a short amount of time. You know, you talked about Finland and Canada and so on, and it was difficult to get that much content out in the 4 or so minutes that you spoke, and I felt that was really commendable.
I thought the government team was perhaps a little bit stronger on the motivation part because they actually explained how having a security to have an income would give people a chance to try new things and would also make them less in danger of failing. I don't think opposition addressed that well. Opposition perhaps did a little bit better in questioning how will government actually change the social structure, because government was a bit vague on that.
What I would say to both teams is 2 pieces of advice. First, try to have a balance between reasonings and examples. Like, although we believe that examples are very powerful too as well, logics or reasonings is also very powerful too. And having a balanced mix and combination of both would definitely elevate the debate to the higher dimension. But again, I was very impressed by the quality of debate. I look forward to what closing half is going to say.
Thank you for your insightful comment. Now we move on to the second half of the debate, and for that I would like to invite the member of government up to the podium.
Nowadays, most countries, including Korea, is in capitalism. And so people have to consume their basic and other things in order to survive in the society. And therefore, there are always a gap between the rich and the poor, and it is also increasing nowadays. So this house believes that governments should provide a universal basic income. To start with the rebuttal, the DLO said that throughout the universal basic income, that's it, and it's not a long-term solution. However, I want to emphasize that it can be a foundation of the lower class people to go to the upper class society. And second, DLO said that 37% was said that they would quit the job. And however, we have to think that through basic income, we can only buy basic supplies. The goal is to satisfy the basic need. And for example, they still have a goal, like getting their own house or eating chicken every day. So I think the reason that the universal basic income makes people lazy does have a flaw in the statement. And also third, the opposition give us that the 40 and the 50% of the poverty is only the some who get privileged through this basic income. However, we found that there were no standard, and the opposition didn't suggest the standard of this, what poverty means by 40 and 50.
On that point,
yes.
Does it mean that we have to provide this basic income for people that are rich as well as the poor?
No, what I want to point is that the opposition side didn't give us the standard of what is the poverty and what is the 40 and the 50%. So we thought that was kind of ambiguous. And to go out further for the extension, we want to say that PM said that long-term, it can give us the long-term benefit, and the government have to spend large spend, and we want to say that it is government's responsibility and to give us the universal basic income, because it is due to the structural problem.
On that point,
The
ma'am.
gap between the rich and poor is due to the capitalism. The structural problem is due to the governments who has set up the economy and make the policy in the country. The fundamental problem makes poor impossible to go up, and eventually they threaten their lives and get exhausted in their lives because simply they don't have the money to continue their basic human life. Citizens are not voluntarily born as the country's citizen. So, for example, we're just born to be Korean. And however, if they're struggling from the country's structural problem, which is this kind of economical problem, I'm 100% sure that government have to take responsibility of its citizens.
POI, ma'am.
Sorry. It is obvious that the government has responsibility of basic income, and it is obvious that they have to save people by basic income. Also, I want to have an extension that the PM said that we should give opportunity and we should give human rights to these citizens. And I want to have an extension for quality of life. Since lots of money allows us to buy basic supplies, it can upper the quality of life. The importance the basic supplies has, basic income has, is the whole society's quality of life is getting increased. And lots can have their own rights of having basic life to survive and also be happy. So basic income is so influential in the people who are not privileged, and we believe that it will also give dramatic positive effects to the country. Also, we want to say that how the BI gives the social benefit. If there are lots of income, then it will ultimately increase of spending the whole country. Increased income can be a momentum of the boosting economy and business recovery. We have to focus on the disposable income, which is the actual income that can be used in spending. So we can think that the lower class and the middle class, if we give them the basic income, there can be more disposable income, which gives the circulation of the money in the market. And if we give the upper class, it does not contribute to the circulation of overall market. For example, the dropping effects in the 1980s US has failed. And in contrast, if you give this middle and the lower class, then it will actually contribute to the whole market. And thank you.
Okay. That was a member of government arguing for the motion, so that governments should give universal basic income. Some of the points raised include that UBI will improve the quality of life of those living in poverty. So let's see how many of our audience judges agree with the member of government. 24, so just under half of our audience judges agree with the member of government. All right, going in direct opposition is a member of opposition. Let's see if she does a better job at persuading the audience.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, we are extremely glad to find that the government and the opposition side both has the same goal, the ultimate goal, which is to achieve civil rights and happiness for every single citizen. However, second, the government side has provided us the model, but the opposition today is kind of puzzled about why they chose that model in particular, because we believe that that is a more ineffective way of achieving the same goal that both of the teams would like to pursue today. So basically, before moving on to our arguments, I, as the member of opposition, would like to walk through the arguments presented by the government team today before going on. First of all, they provided a model of getting rid of all the pensions that exist today. For example, unemployment pensions and other kind of social insurance and all of the social security fundings that are being received by people right now. But instead, they would like to provide universal basic income. However, we believe that under this model, that this will become very ineffective in two perspectives. First of all, the monetary perspective and also the civil rights perspective, both of which were mentioned by the government team. So first of all, in terms of monetary, they mentioned how this is a better policy because they will be receiving less taxes from people, and in the long run, people will be getting out of these pensions and there will be more productive members of the society. I would like to elaborate on this point later on in the argument, but in regards about having more taxes, we would like to say that this will alleviate the entire society. We believe that this is not a very substantial amount of money that can make people raise to other ranks and go to another class, get a better job. But this is just the minimum amount, like the government side was emphasizing, suggesting in regards to the monetary policy. And so therefore, we believe that this amount is not substantial enough to support these people to make any significant changes. And therefore, we believe that focusing on specific goals such as unemployment or healthcare is a much better solution that we have to pursue today. Oh, no, thank you. In this society. So therefore, we believe that the model that they provided is very ineffective in terms of what they are, in terms of monetary, like they mentioned. And second of all, in regards to civil rights and equality, Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen, we would like to say that their world is not as different as our world. We believe that the current status quo is also serving to make citizens have better lives, and the government also has the right, has the goal of achieving better civil rights. But basically, what they're trying to frame us into thinking is that both sides, that the opposition team has no such thing, and they're making it seem as if we're mutually exclusive. However, we would like to emphasize today that the policy that they are providing and the benefits they're providing is not mutually exclusive from the policy that we are suggesting, and we believe that we're doing a much more effective and better goal of doing that by targeting to people who really need it, the people who are really suffering from poverty, and the people who really need help on specific goals. So therefore, we believe that the policy that the opposition would like to present today is much more effective. So going on to the extension to what the opening opposition has mentioned in their speeches, we would like to target the aspect of feasibility. This was actually mentioned in the opening government and the opening opposition a little briefly, so we would like to continue on that logic. We believe that feasibility is a very important aspect in this policy because this will also cost a strong amount of money, just like, well, it might be similar as the status quo, but we believe that this will, in the long run, be much more ineffective, and this will certainly reach this tipping point at one point because we believe that this policy, based on the arguments of the opening opposition, they have mentioned that people will have a moral hazard, basically meaning that people will not be motivated to work even harder if they're provided with a certain amount of income. Based on that logic, we believe that there will not be any substantial changes to the social structure we have right now, which means that although there might be some people who are raised out of poverty, who have a better standard of living life, but that means that compared to the people who are making more productive income, the increased rate of the people who don't have a job, who are actually relying very highly dependent on the welfare itself, will increase much more faster, which means that this system will no longer be feasible because there will be people who are productive members of society who are contributing their own money, but there are others who are not. Basically, we do not create any more net value, and we believe at one point that this will reach a tipping point, just like the example of Greece that has happened very recently, which means because people there were provided with pensions beginning from the age of 35, and they have three people in every industry, and they have three people for supporting four who are on leave and who did not have a job. So basically, we believe that such policy will certainly lead onto leave our economy in shambles, and we will not be achieving anything at the end of the day. So we would like to mention to the opposing government that reducing poverty and making people not dependent on welfare policy is a clearly different thing, and we would like to hear an answer before this debate ends. Thank you.
All right, that was the member of opposition arguing against the motion, so arguing that governments should not provide a universal basic income. All right, let's see how many of our audience judges agree with the speaker. 42. So almost double the member of government. All right, well done. Now we move on to the second to the last speaker, the government whip. Please step forward to the podium.
The speaker will summarize the points suggested by the government and explain why the government side has won the debate. The government side has provided more valid arguments throughout the debate. First, what this speaker wants to suggest is that we should focus on what is the problem. The motion this House believes that we should provide a universal basic income to all the citizens is the motion suggesting the solution. So what is the problem? Since the problem is the current system of welfare is not working well and has a lot of problems. So they are not guaranteed enough money or supplies to make their basic living, especially those who are poor. And also, their social rights are not effectively exercised throughout this policy. The purpose of social welfare is to allow those people to exercise their social rights fully. However, this is not working well. This is a problem the government side has suggested. And this House will now rebut the points made by the opposition side. First, the economic effectiveness. As the Prime Minister mentioned, the universal UBI...
Sir?
No, thank you, sir. No, thank you, ma'am. it is not the money that is wasted. Rather, it can be utilized in various ways. Considering the gap between rich and poor, giving the money only to the poor is not equal. It can lead to reverse discrimination, and it can lead to various side effects. No, thank you, ma'am. No defined or absolute standard of poverty is existing, and even if the government gets the standard of this, there are people who would oppose to this standard. There are many people who will think they are poor, but they're not actually poor. So there is no universal standard to who is rich and poor. So it'll be equal to provide the basic income to all. Yes, ma'am.
That's exactly why we have a different standard for each and every policy that serves a specific purpose. Then what you're saying is not very valid in this situation.
This house doesn't understand the point, and what this house wants to mean is that since the standard for those who are poor or not is not valid and unequal, so it will be equal to provide all the citizens the amount of money. So, and second, the morale of the workers would drop as suggested by the opening opposition. However, this house believes that people's interaction with the society is not a simple thing to determine. We cannot simply say that it is how we, and also it is the hasty generalization made by the opposition side, and also this house believes that since there are counterexamples such as Finland, and also there's no evidence or no firm evidence that the workers' morale will drop, this house believes that it cannot be a valid argument. And third, the fundamental problem. The opposition side mentioned that it is the absurd plan to give $1 million, and this house agrees that the amount of money is small. However, even though the money is small, they can be used to circulate the economy. As the previous speaker from the government side has mentioned, it can contribute in the small business or also in the economy, and also contribute to the economic circulation. No, thank you, ma'am. And ultimately, we promote the social benefit as the member of government has mentioned previously. And even if the inflation might happen, there is no change that there will be a certain amount or increased amount of disposable income by all the citizens. And this speaker was...
On that point?
No, thank you, ma'am. And also, the speaker would elaborate more on the government's responsibility as the government side has keep mentioning. And it mentions that in most countries' constitution, it mentions that it is the government should provide them the social rights. The social right is as a way of effectively granting the citizens...
POI, sir.
No, thank you, ma'am. Rights, and it is the right that can grant other rights. So, and also in the capitalism system, there are always gap between rich and poor. So, in order to solve this gap between rich and poor, and also solve the problems of the fundamental market economy, we think that welfare should be introduced. The concept of welfare is making the people who are less benefited to participate in the society and grant them basic social rights in order to grant their other rights. And also, for the remaining time, this house would focus on the economic side. If the incomes of the people increase, the ultimate increase of the spending is followed. The increased income will boost the economy, and also it leads to the business recovery. And this house will focus on disposable income. Disposable income means the actual income that can be used in spending, and that can be also used in the actual development of the economy. Since for the lower class and the middle class, if they're given basic income, there are more disposable income, which contributes to the circulation of the money in the market, which will ultimately act as a momentum for boosting the economy and leads to the social benefit of all the society. Thank you.
Okay, that was the government whip arguing for the motion, so that government should provide a universal basic income. Okay, so let's find out how many of our audience judges felt persuaded by the government whip. 17. I think that was the lowest count we've had today. 17 out of 50 audience members agreed with the government whip. All right, it's time for the last speaker of today's debate, the opposition whip. Please step forward to the podium.
So I am the opposition whip, and I'm here to prove the many fallacies given by the government side. So first of all, the Prime Minister has introduced us the case of Finland. And ladies and gentlemen, where is Finland now? The Finland media call themselves Helsinki for their capital, Helsinki. And that makes it so clear that Finland's experiment has failed, and now the Finland's, like many other countries in Europe, their economy is in shambles. And what the government side is proposing to you, everyone, is that they will happily lead our nation into a failed experiment, to a mistake. And thank you very much for that, for those absurd, proposed in the first place. And also, we agree with the government side that the fundamental purpose of a state is to safeguard our citizens and help them give a sustainable economy. However, what the government side does not see is that we will stand by equity, not equality. The government side, what they don't know is that the government side will not give the resources, the limited resources, to the people in their greatest need, but rather they will give to everybody else. And by that, our opposition will give our money to the people in need, the poorest people of our society, so that the people in their greatest need will get the help of the government, which successfully fulfills the role of the government. And now, moving on to the refutes given by the government, they have constantly attacked us for having no standard between rich and the poor. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is why we have specific policies for each case. That is why a nation has policies for housing, scholarship, clothing, everything else. And who was it that said that they were going to abolish all the policies about that and give the citizens a bit of cash?
Point, please.
The government side. And that is why, now, who doesn't have the standard? We believe we have the standard, and the person who is destroying the standard is the government bench. And that moves on. You will have protests right on your doorstep if you abolish all those policies. You will not be able to take away the welfare if you look at Greece. If Greece was trying to make spending cuts, there were riots all over the country, and that is what's going to happen in Korea if you're making spending cuts. So make it crystal clear that we will have to spend more money. Korea household credits are 1.3 quadrillion, ladies and gentlemen, and the Federal Reserve is implying that they will increase interest rates within this year, meaning that our burden for household credits will be ever high, and the government side will still use more money for this UBI. And that leads to the fact that at the end of the day, what the government side is proposing you is a country with bankruptcy, no monetary safety, and they will abolish the responsibility of a state that they have been emphasizing. And moving on, they've been emphasizing about human rights, how the government will be protecting civil rights with UBI, and with their status quo, what they're emphasizing is that we are not protecting civil rights now. However, first of all, UBI will not magically solve all the problems, and we gave you many problems like moral hazard and so on, which you did not refute. And also, currently, we are providing healthcare, scholarship, clothing, housing, many of the things, and we are additionally giving opportunities for jobs. Now, just what do we need to do more to protect civil rights? Because we believe civil rights are housing, food,
On that point,
clothing. Yes, sir.
does the speaker believe that current welfare system is working well to substitute the system of UBI?
For UBI, we believe that under UBI it will fail, and under our policies it will succeed. And also, moving on, so the civil rights, we are doing all that we can do, and we don't see the difference between UBI and the policy we are doing. So they should be telling us what's the clear difference, the huge merit we should have with UBI and abolish all the policy we have now. And they talked about wealth gap, and first of all, I have proved to everybody that those UBI will put our economy in our place, drag them through the ground. And so what they're telling us is that if our country is here, they would rather have this than this. If the wealth gap is small, they would rather have the poor poorer. And we believe that that is not the purpose of a government. We believe that increasing the living standards for the poor is the core purpose, and that is why the opposition has a better solution for the problem given by the government side. And they talked about the incentive to work, and they somehow magically, if we give money to everybody, they will be eager to work, go to workplaces, be productive. Now, we believe that history does not lie, ladies and gentlemen, and just look at what happened to the Soviet Union. If giving money to the people were so productive and make people so happy that they could work, why would USSR fall in the first place? Why would North Korea fall in the first place? So we believe that there is somehow magic that will cause people to be more productive. We do not understand with that. So therefore, what we have proven to you today is that under the UBI, generally, our economy will fail, just like Finland, as they told us. And therefore, the opposition has a better solution for the problem given by the government stance. And that is why we urge you to choose your future wisely. Thank you very much.
All right, that was the last speaker of today's debate, the opposition whip arguing against the motion so that government should not give UBI. All right, let's see how many of our audience judges agree with the opposition whip. I see almost all the lights on, 48. That brings the total to 90 out of 100 lights. Well done, that's almost all the audience members. While our judges are making their final decision, let's find out what our audience judges feel. So, audience judges, if you agree with the motion, so if you think the government should provide a universal basic income, turn your lights on. But if you think the opposition bench did a better job and that government should not provide a universal basic income, please leave your lights turned off. All right, at the count of 3, please make your decision. 1, 2, 3. Okay, surprisingly not that many lights. Okay, it looks like just 12 of our audience members agree with the motion, while 38 disagree. All right, so it looks like the opposition bench did a better job. So the final decision has been made, but before I announce the results, I would like to hear from the judges once again on how they saw the debate. First, Professor Kong.
Now, the first speaker in the closing government team, the member of government, I thought that you gave a really, in a sense, a kind of a deep, almost philosophical argument, because you're focusing on, what truly are the goals of a policy like universal basic income.
You can still be much more explicit in what your extensions are. For example, closing government, I thought your argument was more micro-argumentation about explaining what people would necessarily feel about moral hazard and whatnot. Secondly, I would say be comprehensive and be specific on stakeholders you're analyzing.
I think the closing government had a slight advantage in terms of the amount of material they explained with the idea of a multiplier effect, which I don't think closing opposition said much about. So that was probably a strategic mistake. But closing government also maybe didn't utilize that argument as well as it could.
It's time for me to announce the top 2 teams of today's debate. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the program, these 2 teams will go on to the semi-final round, where they will continue competing for the coveted title of Korean Debating Champion. But for the other 2 teams, unfortunately, their journey ends here. So, the top 2 teams are Seongnam Foreign Language High School and Hana Academy Seoul. Congratulations! So both the winning teams are from the opposition bench. How do you feel?
I think we had a great experience, regardless of who won in this debate, because we could discuss social issues that we hadn't thought about before. And 2 years later, we're going to be adults that will have to know about the economy and stuff. So I think that this debate itself was very valuable for me.
Well done, and you?
Same for me. It was a great experience to check our passion about debating and a lot of diverse ideas. And I guess it was a great time to debate with my partner too.
Right.
I would like to thank for this program.
All right, we'll also hear from students at the Hana Academy Seoul. How do you feel?
I'm a senior this year and I'll be graduating, but I'm glad that I took on this challenge and I hope to have better results for the upcoming rounds.
And you, sir?
Yeah, it was a pleasant surprise, and I'm really happy that I was able to do this experience. And I think it was a very productive and beneficial time to talk about the future of our nation and of the world as people who will lead the world in a decade or so. So yeah, I think I really enjoyed it, and yeah, it was a pleasant surprise.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And well done to both teams. Well done to the other teams again. You put up a really good fight, and thank you for joining us. All right, that's all the time we have left for today's episode of Intelligence High School Debate. We have more fierce debates coming up and more interesting topics as well, so please do join us again next week. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.